This one's so common, it's basically a cliche, you know. You gotta win the hearts and minds. Especially when it comes to politics. You hear that all the time, obviously, a campaign for the hearts and the minds of the people. But you can have too much heart and you can have too much mind. And if you look at the last bit of years, it really seems like the two parties in the United States, at least, have organized themselves. One being just hopelessly heart, and the other being hopelessly mind. And it seems like there's a bit of a metamorphosis going on, but the first party to figure out that you need both, you need to get that ratio right, is going to be the one that changes the game, at least for a period of time. Because you have quotes like, facts don't care about your feelings. And you have other situations where people profess from the deepest parts of them this and that while weeping with just this look in their face as if the whole world depends on this thing. While there seems to be absolutely no calculation applied at all. It seems like for the longest time, one political party was just saying what they felt all the time. And that's a luxury in the United States, to be honest, to be able to speak about political issues with feelings instead of rationale. Like that's pretty lofty if you think about it. But if you go for a long enough period of time operating that way, eventually you're going to need the cold hand of the mind to reorient things. Because you start building a very fluffy apparatus that believes with the power the power and force of all or nothing, as if everything depends on each issue, because that's the problem with being too much heart, is that each issue feels like life and death. And yeah. And I like the two-party system. That's probably an unpopular opinion, because this is why. If you go through Europe and you go through other places where the public selects its leaders, in Germany, for example, and even the UK and France, they have 5 parties, 4 or 5 parties, but they all sort of lean left or right. They have these coalitions. But the issue is you have to have coalitions to govern, A, and B, you have these little dividing lines that tends to keep people within those boxes. Even more so than the two-party system. At least with the two-party system, you have the full range and spectrum of, hypothetically a bunch of smaller parties just all clustered together, but we don't have these dividing lines keeping us from compromising. So if anything, if you have different parties with different names, splintered off and fractured, that still follow a lean left, lean right pattern, then your multi-party system is more often than not going to leave you unable to govern, which is what Europe is finding out right now. But yeah, it's like the right is stuck with the far right, and the left is stuck with the far left. And the true test of the two political parties in the United States is how they manage that. That's a big thing. You cannot let that extreme grab you by the balls and pull you around, because it will kill your party if you do that. It definitely will. And yeah. But above all else, there is just sense. I think it was Carl Jung who said the mind doesn't go between right and wrong, it goes between sense and nonsense, like a pendulum. And a lot of the time, what is right what is orderly are very similar. But to win hearts and minds, man, you need a couple of things. And as shallow as it sounds, you need charisma. You need to be appealing to the eye and to the ear, no matter what you're saying. I mean, say, hypothetically, we ended up in a situation where we had a political candidate who won the hearts and minds of the people in such a way that he or she had 95% support. Like, what if there was somebody that good who spoke on behalf of issues and people so well, so universally, that it garnered 95% support? What then? I mean, if this person truly did have positions that led to the best outcomes for the good of the people, would that 95% not be justified, or would you become suspicious? Would it make you suspicious if somebody had 95% support, like Putin or Xi Jinping? But their 95% is obviously not the same as what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about a real 95%. What if somebody so captivated the hearts and minds of people that that was the situation? Would you not have people who opposed it just to oppose it, just so we could avoid a monopoly like that? And that's the thing. And there's no such thing as a one-party state. There are states that have one party on paper officially, but if there is one single person that opposes it, you already have a splinter. It's just a matter of whether or not that splinter grows. And it's not possible to have a one-party state because all things are divided down the middle, and it ends up becoming a left and a right that come together to make a whole, just like the Republicans and the Democrats. And that's always going to be the case. And we get mad when the parties are too similar, and we get mad when the parties are too distinct. So really what you're talking about when you're doing politics is the messenger less than the message, because we all know what we need to do. Like, at the end of the day, we all have enough sense to know what needs to happen. And more often than not, when you hear people engaging in political discourse, it is less the message, it is more the messenger. More often than not, how a person is treated on various news outlets, how they're treated in the public, how the opinions of everybody come to be, is the messenger. Because nobody really is ever saying anything truly new, and we all, on some level or another, know what has to be done. So, given that, it's the messenger. So, you're going to have a bunch of people over the course of the years saying similar things, just like it's always been. All political campaigns have the same general thing going on. Those who tend left kind of say the left stuff, and those who tend right kind of say the right stuff. And you have a whole room full of people contending. So who ends up becoming the front runner? Who ends up being somebody that is able to speak and exist in a way that actually reaches through the TV or reaches straight into you and hooks you in some way? And that's what we mean by hearts and minds, obviously. And even if we did have somebody like that, they'll come and go anyway. I mean, FDR was pretty popular in his day, and granted, World War II was going on. He had his 4 terms, and we've had a lot of very beloved presidents here in the United States. And a lot of the time, we don't know they're beloved until later on. It's almost like we're not allowed to know, because we're weary of somebody becoming too beloved. We have this fear of the executive branch expanding too much and, taking too much of the other 2 branches along with it. And I think that has something to do with not only the current state of affairs, the way that's happened in other places, but I think it has to do with the Roman Empire as well, because they started as a republic, and eventually they had themselves an emperor. As the Senate weakened in power and diminished over time and became essentially useless. But so far as I'm alive personally, no matter who is in office, it could be the person I voted for, it could not be, I would fight that with my last breath, because the republic in the United States must go on, and it will. And so much so must the process by which we select our leaders. Obviously, the democratic process. So the heart and the mind. Some blend of charisma, wisdom, intellect, genius even. Their appearance, their triumphs. They are a victorious sort of person. They're not a loser, so to speak. They go all around. They shake hands. They kiss babies. They have photo ops. They try to get the heart. They try to make us feel. But at the same time, they also need to appeal to those who are the sticklers, the minds, the ones who need policy. You'll hear that a lot. I only voted for XY because of policy. I don't care about their shortcomings, which is understandable. But there is something quite euphoric. I've never been in this position, but I have a strong sense, by listening to what I've heard people say, watching people run for office, and even become famous in general, but especially running for office. There's a special euphoria that a leader gets when they have been selected by their peers to run a nation like the United States, to manage it. There's a special bond, especially when you have to campaign and go through a bruising process where you actually suffer, because the public goes on that ride with you, especially this day and age, because we're all just so damn connected. We really go on that ride together. And in this last presidential election, I knew it would be wild, but it got pretty wild. And there were certain moments, very pivotal moments, that will go down in history as immortal, where Trump was able to win the hearts and minds of people on accident. There was always going to be a group of people in the United States and globally who Trump would have never ever gotten through to. No matter how much he said, no matter what he did, he would have never gotten through to them. But getting shot at, shared trauma, shared sense of loss, shared damage is very, very binding. And you couldn't stage something like that if you tried. And then to have it twice and be a continuing threat, and then to have him sit down with Rogan. And I've known Trump for years. I voted for him 3 times, and when he sat down with Rogan, even I, for the first time, felt some kind of bond, because I've always just viewed him as a businessman, a showman, somebody who likes to lead and likes the people who he leads. But there was something about that Joe Rogan podcast that crept in. It got me. Because for me, it was always mind with him. It was always policy. I never felt a particular affection for the man until the Joe Rogan podcast. And all of a sudden, I understood him. And I think that happened to a lot of people, too. And that setting and that scenario, as we go into the future, is going to be a very potent thing for the whole hearts and minds thing. The ability to just sit and have a conversation and change the format from the rigid intellectualism, or at least the rigidness of the landscape of mind, to a more ephemeral, ever-moving, soft and relaxed atmosphere of the heart. And honestly, I think if things keep going on the current trajectory, democracy, you could call it, I guess, sort of the tip of the spear. It's one of the last invented systems for choosing leaders, and it's going to evolve. I mean, we'll ideally always choose our leaders, but the way we connect with those leaders is going to change. Even just 10 years ago, it was so very different. It's like, these people campaigned, and sort of yay or nay, kind of a lukewarm response. It wasn't really anything particularly strong in terms of connection. And they went out there, and they either did good or bad, and, and that was that. And that was 10 years ago. And Barack Obama actually was a very potent man of heart. And when I say that, I mean he was very good at being a person who connected with people. He was a very gifted speaker. He was honestly a very rare talent in terms of his ability to connect with people. But the sticklers for policy, the mind people, they could never get past that. But yeah, over time, things are going to get more and more intimate, and I see it happening now, like Ron DeSantis in Florida, and the up and coming people. Even though Ron's on his way out, he was sort of riding the initial wave of this, and so was Trump, Obama too a little bit. But over time, the people who we select to manage this place, we're going to feel more personally bound to them. Like we're going to be going on a ride with them. And it's going to be different than it was with celebrities, because for politicians, it's not just acting, it's not just performing. It's like you have to actually produce, and there's a very easy way to measure your production. It's not so subjective. And I think overall that bond, that relationship that is going to form between the public and its leadership is going to make this place so fucking potent, because we're going to be in a situation that really we've never seen before, where we're all kind of together in this thing, And I know that sounds kind of hokey, and I know it sounds like, no matter what, people will always be split, and people always will be, of course. But on the whole, I think Trump said something the other a couple months ago when he was campaigning that made a whole lot of sense, and it just clicked. He said, in order to run this place, to manage it, you have to care about it. You have to care about the people. And you've never heard that before. It's a very simple thing. It's obvious, but nobody's ever actually said it out loud. Not that I'm aware of. And it's true. You're not going to really be able to get away with running for office and not caring. You just won't be able to get away with it anymore, unless we somehow get a dose of amnesia collectively and we sort of forget about this whole experience. I don't think we're going to go back to that sort of laissez-faire, easy come, easy go mentality with leaders that led to us not really paying much attention to what they did for the last maybe 40 or 50 years. Like we just sort of showed up for the elections, paid attention when they campaigned, sent them off, and sort of forgot about it. But I think that's going to change, dude. I don't think people are just going to be able to get away with not caring, because it's going to show. And due to the fact that we are all smart enough to know, generally, that our leaders should be doing and saying things that are clearly on our behalf, it's going to be the person who most shows their sincerity in caring about that's going to get the most of our attention. It's going to be the person who really does seem to care about the United States, where it's going, and its people, who are going to truly win the hearts and the minds. And there was a time not too long ago that caring might have looked like a weakness. It might have looked like naivety. You know, it might have looked like something a bit too romantic. But not anymore. Now, you really can't do without it. And at the same time, you're going to have to know a thing or two. Because, as we're all fully aware, this is the information age. We are the ones who are drowning and basking and just living in a whole lot of information all the time. And we can know a whole lot. We can learn anything we want to learn. Like me, you, everybody can be pretty fucking knowledgeable on the general geopolitics of the world. Like, we can learn about anything. So the bar is getting higher and higher. There's more and more people who are opting to just spend their time learning, because a lot of the learning comes in the form of entertainment, and it looks and sounds nice. People are getting, collectively, on the whole, smarter, in my opinion, even though there's many, many examples of the exact opposite. Believe me, I know. And the literacy rates in schools are going down, and math scores are going down, but that all is something that I think we've all come to recognize needs to change. School has gone way too much into heart. It's all heart. It's too soft. Doesn't need to regress in terms of, strictness. We can still care and be a source of authority at the same time. Like, honestly, I think it has a lot to do with the shock of women sort of participating more and more in society over the last 60 years. I think like, if you look at things a couple layers zoomed out, for the most part, humanity has had men at the helm, obviously, but the women and the lives of these men had a huge impact on their decisions, because there is no confidant a man has had that's ever been more important as his wife or the woman in his life, because it's those conversations that are the innermost circle, if you're doing it right. And so if you look at it from a few layers zoomed out, as ladies have entered society, civilization, with 2 feet, obviously things are going to shift in terms of momentum. Things are going to get a little softer in that initial shock, because the tendency is going to want to be to say, men on the whole have been doing this way for so long, let's do the opposite because we're here now. And it's how you end up with things like not prosecuting repeat offenders. It's how you get things like interpreting law on behalf and for the benefit of the one committing crime, not the victim. It's empathy saturation. It's how you get situations where the standards for education is lowered. It's how you get an explosion in the humanities. It's how you get a situation where cold reason seems oppressive. but it's not. We are on the other end of it, though. It probably hit its peak a couple years back, and we're going back in the other direction now and recalibrating. Like we're going drifting and drifting and drifting that way. Now we've come back around, and we're probably going to hit this point that is some blend of both, to where we have the wisdom to look at each individual situation, each case, each person, and apply both heart and mind without going too far into either. Because as a civilization, as a species, like the United States hasn't had men and women and all races of all people and all everything completely equal on paper for very long. So you have to view the conditions at the moment as a permanently in flux series of adjustments. And like I say, like the United States out here, we're trying to do something out here. Like, people have their criticisms, and I understand their criticisms, but all things considered, we're doing pretty fucking good. Like, it's okay to fucking pat yourself on the back every once in a while. And you don't have to be so hard on yourself. You don't have to hold up this image of complete perfect egalitarianism and say, because of the fact that you're not that, then you are bad. You don't need to do that. When you do that, you are bleeding out your own life force in a directionless, aimless shape. And that's part of one of the many things that's going on. And once we get that balance right, once we hover between heart and mind, we sit right on that line in the middle, then we have perfect reason, or as close to perfect reason as one can have. And you're able to move into heart and into mind as changing real-time situations come and go. You don't just want to have a blanket heart point of view or a blanket mind point of view, because you'll get half a life out of that. There's nothing more boring than a person who's all mind. And there's nothing more, what's the word? There's nothing more, I end up sort of with pity with a person who's too much heart, because I see what's going on there, and I'm not even sure if pity is the right word. It's more like I feel for them, because I know what needs to happen there, and they're feeling too much for too many other people, and this world is too big of a place, and there's too many things going on for you to handle it. If you're in a place where you're sort of all heart, learning about the troubles of the world is one of the last things you're going to want to do. Like, you're not ready for that. You're not in a good spot for that. And if you do that, you will bleed into everybody that you talk to. You will use this great power that we have, this access to everybody, and the ability to broadcast your thoughts all over the world, to bleed all over everybody and hemorrhage. Not everybody is ready to deal with the deepest pitfalls of humanity, especially if you're stuck in heart, especially if you are so incredibly selfless that it hurts you. And of course, somebody who is all mind is just as bad, because those people tend to want to compensate, because they explain themselves. They have a nice, neat paragraph full of very well articulated thoughts about exactly the state of this or the state of that and what needs to happen. But people respond to them in a way that's almost like an attack. You know, they're constantly being attacked. And their response is going to be that of the person who has the truth, who has the real inside information, who's always here to educate. And that is, honestly, I sort of pity that person as well. And I've been there. I've been both. You know, we all are both or one or the other at some point, but it's always the best in the middle because it's robust. It's robust in the middle, like charm, charisma, the feeling of charm and charisma, which is absolutely essential. And this is from a male point of view, of course. The feeling of charm and charisma, you feel like an animal and think like a man. There is charisma at its core. Charm is energy in motion. It is at its core non-dormant energy. It's energy flowing out of your fingers, your eyebrows, your lips, your hands, your feet. It's flowing out of you and into whoever's in front of you, and it's flowing out of them and into you. It's motion, it's flow. It's accepting what is happening around you, but at the same time having your own framework. And it's not clutching on to that framework. It's not clutching on to what you want so tightly that the flow stops. The band Boston, there's a set of lyrics that I've heard many, many times. I'm sure you have too, and it's more profound than it sounds. It's hold on loosely, but don't let go. If you cling too tightly, you're going to lose control, which is exactly perfect. And that's what's happening. If you want to be a charismatic person, you have to let energy move out of you and let it come into you. Too much heart and too much mind is akin to only exerting or only sort of receiving. You have to be in a situation where you're both exerting and taking in the world at the same time, right there in the middle. And you sort of fluctuate back and forth, 70% exerting and then 70% absorbing. There are some people who cannot get out of that state where they're absorbing their surroundings and feel as a object to be moved by others and their surroundings. They're less able to let that energy flow out of them. They hold on to it and they keep it. And it ends up looking and feeling like a sort of self-defense, a thing of protection, because they don't want to say things and do things and move a certain way, because that invites the possibility that somebody might hear and see those things and think that they're not good and respond to it in that way. And then that invites the possibility that they may see that response and carry it with them and remember it, that somebody deemed what they do as insufficient. And there are others who absolutely cannot absorb what's going on around them. They just radiate out and out and out nonstop. They have that look in their eyes. It's sort of flaccid and blank, as if they're just only exertion with minimal absorption. And they're hard to the right, and the absorbing person is hard to the left. But I'm telling you, the feeling of charisma, the feeling of what you see when somebody is just so fucking charming, is somebody who is doing both. And really that's the true intelligence in social interactions and being a human being in general, is knowing when to give and when to take and what that looks like. If you try to just give and put your foot on the gas, people will leave. People will shoo off. And if you take, people will leave. People will, they'll leave. And, honestly, I know it sounds so simple because it is, and all things are really that simple. All things, as I've said many times, are two opposing things that appear as opposites, but they actually go together. And in the event of them going together, they become this third thing, like charm, charisma, like the political process, Democrats, Republicans, like hearts and minds, equating to the general feeling of bonding, closeness, giving and taking, comprising the overall activity of a person. And look, it's like, I realize there's a lot of people on the internet who I've listened to, and they say some very stupid things. They say what everybody says, but they try to repackage it in fancy language that only ends up making them sound less good, because it's clearly that circular speak. You know, we are using all these modern words that are supposed to, make you some sort of superior person if you eat this and think that and read this. But that's all, for the most part, a pitch. That's somebody trying to sell you something. I would wonder how many people are motivated by the genuine desire to see the world a little bit better. How many people would feel satisfaction in knowing that if somebody did happen to hear what they say, that they leave with those words better than they came. And I know ideally, in an idealistic way, we all sort of think that and say that, but there's that other part of us too, that we don't want all people to do better. There are some people that we know that we would prefer to see that they didn't progress, maybe even regress. And that can happen when a relationship turns completely just dark. But this is the basic point. We're shifting into a new, I guess you could say, political and social landscape. People, me included, want to see my fellow human beings as sincere entities. And we've always kind of had this, but we have it way more now, because with this whole internet thing, we all have this ability to pretty easily create a fictional person with fictional characteristics and fictional traits, maybe some truth to them, but the aim is to create this person, get others to believe that this person exists, and uphold that. And we've been finding out over and over again that it's destroying trust. It's destroying trust when you don't know if the person you're talking to is in any way any of these things that they're saying. So we've come to the conclusion that we don't like insincerity. The word that people commonly use is obviously authenticity, but obviously that applies as well. But sincerity. Give what you have to give and take what you need to take. Don't be afraid to take, and don't be afraid to give. And you might look stupid. You might say stupid things. You might be awkward. You might not be Brad Pitt. But it takes time. It takes time bouncing your essence off the world, off other people, and seeing what comes back in order to get this thing down. We come out of the womb just radiating out It's all out. It's hardly any conscious absorption. It's all just heavy passive absorption. We learn all the time without intending to, but we're constantly in this expressive mode. And then as adolescence comes to an end, we get a little bit older, we start to go back the other way a little bit and begin this whole self-reflection thing. And by this point, we've been bouncing our essence off the world and off people. We know a few things at this point. We know for athletes, we know for dorks, we know for nerds. We know if people love us generally or if people don't really like us generally. We're already starting to calibrate, and at this point, some people might start to say, I want out of this game. It's usually around that point that people kind of decide whether or not they're going to continue to play or they're going to resign. But I promise you, it's worth it to not resign. Like, you can stay in the game and not feel that feeling that you feel as if oblivion or outsidedness is the only thing, as if there's an unclimbable hill because there are people who are just so much better looking and so much more likable. But that age, that time, it's not wise to flag out at that age, because you're going to wind up out of the game for a handful of years, and then you're going to re-enter later. So skip the leaving part, because you're going to re-enter anyways. And in those years, those are the most important years for you. Those are the most important years. That's when you really find some shit out. And I get liking solitude and liking being alone. I fucking love that shit. But everybody wants to be liked, let's say. But there is such a thing as putting too much stock into that. Like all things, there's that middle way. It's nice to be liked and loved, but it's also not everything. But there is a certain satisfaction that you're going to get out of this life when the people you think highly of also think highly of you. The reverberations between two people that come from that is the most significant thing we can experience. And over time, our leaders are going to become more like that, which is fascinating.